What do you do when your own wife lets another man introduce her as his girl in front of a crowd, while she calls you just a friend standing 3 steps away? How do you stay calm when her new story paints you as the controlling, bitter ex, even though you are still paying the bills and tucking your child into bed? Can quiet planning and the law undo the damage of her public lies when everyone already thinks they know what happened? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Nikolai, and by the time my wife started calling another man her business partner, I could already feel something shifting under my feet, even if everyone else called it progress. The morning that really stands out began in our small apartment kitchen, the one where every sound seemed louder than it should be. The kettle hissed, the refrigerator hummed, and 2 mugs sat on opposite sides of the counter like they belonged to different homes. Sienna moved around in her bright leggings and cropped gym top, filming a quick story with her phone while our daughter Leah sat at the table with cereal. Sienna told her followers she was heading to the gym again, said she was excited to work with her favorite coach and friend, and I did not need to hear the name to know she meant Dane. Leah asked if we could all go together one day because she thought Dane would make funny faces for her. I poured coffee into my mug and said that maybe we would, trying to sound neutral. Sienna glanced at me over her screen and said I should try not to look so serious when I visited the gym because it hurt her brand. I left for work with the taste of burnt coffee and unspoken words in my mouth. At the warehouse office, I sank into the familiar rhythm of route plans and delivery schedules. Numbers usually gave me comfort. They stayed where you put them if you did the work right. Trucks did not ignore you because your smile was not big enough. Still, my mind kept drifting back to the gym and to Dane, to the way Sienna's eyes lit up when she talked about their projects. On my lunch break, I opened her profile and watched a short video she had posted that morning. She walked across the gym floor, laughing, while Dane adjusted the camera angle, his hand brushing her shoulder in a way that would look accidental to anyone who did not know either of them. The caption said he was the only one who understands her vision, and I sat very still at my desk, reading those words twice. There was no mention of the husband who paid the rent where that vision slept every night. That evening I kept my promise and drove them to the gym. Leah was thrilled just to be going somewhere that was Mom's special place. The building was all glass and steel, with bright posters of toned people along the front windows. Inside, music pounded from speakers, and the smell of rubber mats and energy drinks hung in the air. Sienna seemed to grow taller as soon as she stepped through the door, lifting her shoulders and adjusting her hair like this was the world where she made sense. Dane came over from the weight area, all easy smiles and loud greetings. He gave Sienna a quick hug, the kind you could call friendly if you wanted to, then turned to me and offered a handshake that felt like an afterthought. Sienna told the small group around us that I was her very practical husband, the one who does the boring planning that keeps the lights on. People laughed in a polite way, and I forced a small smile, hearing how it landed. Most of the time, I stood near the edge of the main floor, holding Sienna's bag and filming whenever she asked. She moved through sets of exercises while Dane corrected her form, sometimes with light touches at her waist or back, all in front of mirrors and cameras. She told a group of members that he was her business brain, and that together they were going to launch a program, while I listened and wondered when exactly I had been moved from partner to background. When Dane called over to Leah and asked if she wanted to help him count reps, she lit up. I watched my daughter laugh with a man who barely looked at me unless there was a camera around. At one point, they gathered a few people for a group selfie near the logo wall. Sienna pulled Dane in close, and he slipped his arm around her shoulders with practiced ease. She gestured for me to come into the frame, then laughed and said maybe I should take the photo instead because my energy was too serious for the shot. Everyone chuckled, including me, because I did not know what else to do. I held the phone while they all squeezed together, Sienna in the center, Dane's hand resting lightly at her hip. When the photo snapped, I caught my own reflection in the mirror behind them. A man nowhere in the picture except in the glass, holding the device that made it possible. After the workout, they moved to the small juice bar corner of the gym. Sienna and Dane stood close while they discussed content ideas, talking about angles and engagement, words that clearly did not refer to marriage. I sat on a high stool beside Leah, who drank her smoothie and swung her legs. I tried to start a conversation with Dane, asked about how long he had been running the gym, but he answered in short phrases and turned back to Sienna, as if my questions were like background noise. Sienna told him I always wanted to know every detail, and rolled her eyes in a way that made me feel like a difficult client instead of a husband. Back at home, the gap between us felt wider than the car ride itself. In the apartment kitchen, I washed the shaker bottles while Sienna leaned on the counter, scrolling through the new photos and videos from the day. She told me she needed me to be more chill in the gym because serious faces did not help her image. I said I wanted her to be safe and respected, and that sometimes the way Dane touched her looked like more than coaching. She told me I was reading into things, that this was how the fitness world worked, and that if I trusted her, I would not police her friendships. She did not raise her voice. She simply twisted the frame until concern looked like control. Leah wandered in and asked if Dane would come over for dinner one day. Sienna smiled at her and said maybe, while I watched the question hang between us. Later that night, in our bedroom, I lay on my side of the bed while Sienna sat propped against the headboard, lit by the glow of her screen. Her fingers moved quickly as she replied to messages. The silence between us felt heavy, filled with all the things I was not saying. When she went to take a shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A preview flashed on the lock screen, showing a short video of her laughing on the gym floor with Dane's hand at her waist, sent by a number I did not recognize. Before I could see more, I heard the bathroom water shut off and the soft click of the door latch. She stepped back into the room, saw the light on the screen, and lifted the phone in one quick motion, holding it at an angle where I could not see. She asked if I trusted her or not, her voice flat. I locked my own screen without answering and stared at the ceiling, listening to the tiny sound of her fingers tapping out another story where I suspected I had not been given a fair part. The next morning at the office felt different before I had even put my bag down. The open-plan floor buzzed with the usual noise of keyboards and low conversations, but there was a thicker layer under it, like the air had been stirred. I walked past a cluster of coworkers near the coffee machine and heard my own last name in a short, half-whispered sentence. When they saw me, their faces rearranged into careful smiles. One of them locked her phone so quickly her thumb almost slipped, then asked how my evening had been. I answered that it had been normal enough and kept walking, even though nothing about it felt normal. At my desk, I opened my email, then the route planning software, trying to let numbers and lines pull me into their quiet order. Trucks still had to leave on time, whatever else was happening. For a while, I succeeded, moving through shipments and delays. Then my phone buzzed beside the keyboard. I turned it over and saw a notification from the social app. Sienna had posted a new photo. I told myself to ignore it, but my thumb moved on its own. The post showed Sienna and Dane standing in front of a gym mirror, her head leaned against his shoulder. He looked straight at the camera with an easy smile. The caption said she was grateful to the one who really sees her and helps her live honestly at last. There was no tag for me. The first comments praised her for leaving a controlling situation. One person wrote that she was brave for not letting an insecure man hold her back. A second comment said she deserved someone who treated her like his girl, not his property. My chest felt tight as I scrolled, seeing my life reduced to a set of phrases from people who had never been in our kitchen. Kara had shared the post to her own profile and added tags. She tagged the gym, of course, and Sienna's account. Then, for extra effect, she tagged my employer, using the company handle and calling it the place where I locked myself away with spreadsheets, while Sienna stepped into the light. It was a small sentence, but it pulled my work into a story I had not agreed to. I stared at that line until my computer screen went dark from inactivity. When I looked up, 2 coworkers were standing at the edge of my cubicle, pretending to talk about a shipment delay. One of them asked, with an odd smile, if I had seen the gym post everyone was sharing. The other added that at least Sienna looked happy, then trailed off when he saw my face. I told them quietly that I preferred to keep office talk about work. My voice shook only a little. They apologized in a rushed way and left, whispering as soon as they turned the corner. A few hours later, my manager, Omar, walked past my desk. He did not stop right away. He went to his office, then came back with his laptop, resting his hand on the top of my cubicle wall. He asked in a careful tone if I could step into the glass meeting room when I had a moment. I said I could make time now. On the way there, I saw the reflection of his screen in the glass wall. Sienna's post was open on a browser tab with our company's handle highlighted in the caption. Inside the room, he closed the door gently and sat across from me. He explained that he did not want to invade my privacy, but that when an employee's family member used the company tag in a messy personal story, it became his concern. He said he had seen people calling me controlling and describing me as a problem in my wife's comments. I told him, in a steady voice, that my wife ran her own online life, that I did not approve of the way she framed things, and that there was no violence or criminal behavior, only deeply painful talk. I assured him I understood the company's need to stay clear of gossip. He nodded, said he appreciated my calm, and reminded me that if any of this turned into harassment inside the office, I should bring it to him. When I left the room, my legs felt heavy, but my mind oddly clear. During lunch, I did not go to the break room. I stayed at my desk with my sandwich untouched and opened the post again. This time, I did not read the comments as a wounded husband. I read them like a planner looking at a problem. I opened a blank spreadsheet and gave it a simple numerical name so it looked like any other work file. In the first column, I wrote the date. In the second, I wrote the usernames of people calling me controlling, jealous, or abusive. In the third, I gave a short, neutral description of what they said. I took a slow screen recording of the entire post, from the top of the caption to the last comment, making sure the time and tags were visible. When I heard footsteps behind me, I minimized everything with one tap and opened a plain route chart. My heart thumped until the footsteps faded. Then I went back to the quiet, patient work of saving pieces of a story I knew I might need later. After work, I stopped at the supermarket on the way home. The bright lights and rows of shelves should have felt normal, but every time someone glanced at me, I wondered if they recognized my face from the gym page. At the checkout, the cashier looked from my items to her own phone resting by the register. I saw, for just a second, the photo of Sienna and Dane on her screen before she flipped it face down. She gave me a strained smile and asked if I had any coupons. Behind me, someone in line whispered that they had seen that guy's wife online, then laughed under their breath. I paid, thanked the cashier, and walked out with my bag feeling heavier than it should have. Back in the apartment kitchen, the air smelled like something Sienna had reheated and let cool again. She stood at the counter, still in gym clothes, scrolling through her phone with a small, satisfied smile. She told me she had had an amazing response to her latest post, that people were finally understanding her story, and that sometimes you had to tell your truth, even if it made others uncomfortable. I said, as evenly as I could, that tagging my employer had consequences for me. She replied that if I behaved better, there would be no story to tell, then turned her attention back to the screen. Leah came in, hugged my waist, and asked if I had seen Mom's pretty picture with Dane. I told her simply that I had seen it, and that she did not need to pick sides between adults who were confused. Later that evening, after Leah went to bed, I sat at the small table with my laptop open. I checked a few work emails, then opened a private browser window. I typed in short searches for storage options, cloud backup, and delivery tracking, reading about ways to keep copies of files safe and send things securely if needed. I did not stay on any page long. Each time I heard Sienna move through the hallway, I minimized the window and left only a harmless spreadsheet on the screen. One tab I kept returning to was a simple note app where I wrote dates and phrases, a quiet record of what had been said and when. When I finally closed the laptop and reached for my phone, 2 new notifications slid down from the top of the screen. The first was from the social app. Kara had added me to a group chat with a mocking nickname, sharing a bright flyer for a Riverside Fitness Festival, where Sienna and Dane would appear as special guests. The second was an email from Omar, confirming a follow-up meeting about external reputation and attaching a short note about representing the company professionally. I stared at the group chat ping and the manager's email side by side, feeling how the gym world and my workplace were no longer separate lanes but one tangled road. The River Festival looked harmless on the flyer Kara had sent, all bright colors and vague promises of community wellness, but I knew better than to think anything around Sienna and Dane would stay harmless. When Sienna told me she wanted me to bring Leah, she framed it as proof that we were all mature now, that we could be in the same space without drama. I did not believe her, but I agreed because Leah's eyes lit up at the idea of music, food stalls, and seeing her mother on a stage. On the walk from the parking lot to the embankment, Leah held my hand and skipped ahead, while Sienna walked a little in front of us, already checking her reflection in her phone camera. She said she needed to get to the organizer's tent and that we could find a good spot in the crowd. The Riverside area was crowded with tents and banners. Music played from a central stage, and people milled around holding smoothies in plastic cups. At one corner, a big sign showed photos of local gym owners and influencers, including Sienna and Dane, with their names printed underneath. Her picture showed her laughing at something off-camera, hair perfect, body angled just right. Dane's photo was next to hers, his hand resting on his hip like he owned the whole space. Leah pointed up and shouted that Mom was on a poster. I told her I saw, while my stomach felt like it had swallowed a stone. We found a spot near the front of the stage, close enough to hear every word but far enough back that we were not pressed against the barrier. Sienna and Dane appeared backstage, talking to an announcer with a clipboard. From where I stood, I could see Dane stretch his arm along the back of Sienna's shoulders as they listened, like he was claiming the space around her. Leah waved in their direction. Sienna waved back, but the gesture looked more like something for the cameras than for her daughter. Around us, people lifted phones, ready to film whatever happened. The announcer stepped up to the microphone and shouted a welcome to the crowd, introducing the event as a celebration of health, freedom, and new beginnings. He called Dane's name as a local business owner and hype man, praising him for building a community. Dane jogged onto the stage, taking the microphone with practiced ease. He thanked everyone, made a few jokes about squats and sore legs, then turned and held out his hand toward the backstage area. He said he could not do any of this without the woman who inspired the whole thing. Sienna walked out under the lights, wearing the gym's branded jacket and leggings, her hair pulled back just so. The crowd clapped, some people whistled, and phones rose even higher. Dane slipped his arm around her waist, pulled her close, and into the microphone he called her "my girl," in that casual, claiming way that made it sound like a line he had been waiting to use. The words echoed across the embankment, carried by the speakers, bounced off the water. People cheered and laughed, some turning toward me as if to see how I would take it. I felt Leah's fingers tighten around mine. For a few seconds, I saw nothing but that image. My wife, under stage lights, letting another man publicly name her as his. She did not correct him. Her body went stiff for one heartbeat. Then she laughed and leaned into him, playing along. A group of young women near us squealed and shouted about how cute they were together. Someone behind me yelled that, "This is what real love looks like." I wanted to shout that real love had been standing in kitchens, scraping burnt food off pans, and walking a sleepy 7-year-old to school in the rain, but I stood still. The music swelled again, and Dane moved on to announcing a group workout. When the stage moment ended, people scattered to different activities. Sienna disappeared backstage with Dane, swallowed by the event staff. Leah tugged my hand and asked why her mother had let another man call her that. She said that at school, kids said "my girl" when they were talking about girlfriends, not friends. I swallowed slowly and told her that usually, yes, those words meant more than friendship. She asked if that meant we were not a family anymore, if she had just watched her mother switch teams in front of everyone. I told her that families did not break or heal in one sentence on a stage, but that what her mother had done was serious and not kind. I tried to keep my voice steady so I did not pour my anger into her small hands. We moved away from the stage toward a quieter patch of grass near the children's area. On the way, I saw Kara standing near a food truck, phone held high. From the angle, I realized she had filmed the exact moment Dane said, "my girl." She laughed with a group of friends as she replayed the clip, probably already imagining the caption. I did not confront her. I simply noted the time on the event banner and the way the sunlight hit the water in the video, fixed details I could use later. At the edge of the park's small playground, Leah climbed onto a low slide while I sat on a bench. My parents arrived a few minutes later, having agreed to meet us there when I texted them about the event. Marta sat beside me. Jens stood with his hands in his pockets, watching Leah. I told them quietly what had happened on the stage. Marta's face tightened. She said that when someone let themselves be introduced that way in public, they were not confused. They had made a choice. Jens nodded once and said if Sienna wanted to live like she was already free of me, she needed to carry the full weight of that decision. His words did not come with shouting, but they landed heavier than any raised voice. As the sun started to set, music still pulsed from the main stage, and announcements echoed across the embankment. My phone buzzed with a notification. Kara had posted a short edited video of the moment. It showed Dane pulling Sienna close and saying, "my girl," then cut to a zoomed-in shot of me in the crowd, face still, Leah's hand in mine. The text over the video read, "When you finally say it out loud." Comments were already stacking beneath it, calling me the awkward ex and praising Sienna's courage. I watched the clip once and saved it to my phone, then opened my notes app and wrote down the event name, location, and time. While I did that, I heard a sharp burst of light behind us, like a tiny explosion. I turned and saw a volunteer from the event snapping photos with a camera for the festival page. She had taken a picture of Sienna kneeling beside Leah on the grass, both of them smiling at the camera. In the small preview on her screen, I saw how neatly I had been cropped out of the frame. The camera flash faded, and I understood that the version of this day the world would see had no place for the man who had been standing in the middle the whole time. The invitation to dinner at Sienna's parents' house arrived as a text in the middle of a workday, framed as a chance to clear the air, but I knew from the tone that the air would only be thickened and pushed around, not cleared. On the drive there, Leah sat in the back with her headphones on, humming along to some cartoon song while Sienna sat in the front, scrolling endlessly. She said Irma and Rudolph were worried about her after everything that controlling man has put her through, and when I asked who exactly she meant, she gave me a look that did not need words. She said she was tired of pretending everything was fine, that at least her parents understood her. I turned my eyes back to the road and said nothing, not because I agreed, but because I had learned that every defense became another piece of her script. Irma opened the door with a smile that was too bright, the kind she used for guests she wanted to impress. She pulled Sienna into a hug, kissing her cheeks and telling her how beautiful she looked. When she turned to me, her smile shrank into something polite and stiff. She shook my hand like you might touch a neighbor you barely knew. Rudolph appeared behind her, patting my shoulder and saying it was good to see me out, as if I had been hiding in a cave somewhere instead of living in the apartment with their daughter and granddaughter. The Holt dining room was set with its usual neat placemats and heavy cutlery, framed photos of Sienna's school awards, and childhood trophies lining the walls. I took a seat near the middle of the table where I could help Leah with her food. For the first 10 minutes, the conversation stayed on safe topics. Irma asked about Leah's school, Rudolph talked about his back pain, and Sienna showed her mother some filtered photos from the festival. Irma gushed over the picture of Sienna and Dane on the stage, saying they looked like they had stepped out of a magazine. She did not look at me when she said it. Then, as plates settled and glasses were refilled, the tone shifted. Irma put her fork down, folded her hands, and asked me in a careful voice if I had had time to reflect on how I had treated Sienna these last years. Before I could answer, Sienna leaned forward, ready. She told her parents that she had felt trapped in our marriage, that I constantly questioned where she went and who she saw, that I could not stand her having male friends. She said Dane had given her the courage to admit she had been unhappy for a long time. She called our marriage emotionally dead. She told them the my girl moment was just the truth coming out in public. I listened as she rearranged years of life into a simple story with one villain and one rescuer. In her version, I was the controlling husband whose jealousy had pushed her into the arms of a kinder man. When she paused for breath, I spoke slowly. I said that I had always asked about her schedule because we were raising a child and paying bills together, not because I wanted to own her. I named simple facts, that my name was still on the lease, that I still paid the rent and utilities, that Leah still slept most nights in the apartment where I lived and worked, that Sienna had never once said to my face that our marriage was over, only in captions and comments. I said I had seen her post calling me controlling and abusive, and that strangers now repeated those words as if they were facts. My voice did not rise. I laid the details out like numbers on a sheet. Irma shook her head and said, "Men always tried to hide behind technicalities, like leases and bills, when the emotional truth was obvious." She said that if Sienna felt controlled, then she was controlled, and that was all anyone needed to know. She praised Dane as someone who finally made Sienna glow. Rudolph murmured that it sounded complicated, but that he trusted his daughter's feelings. Sienna laughed and said I was the kind of man who would collect screenshots and call that love. She suggested I should move out if I cared about her healing. The word screenshots had a sour taste on her tongue, like I was doing something dirty by recording the things she chose to say in public. While she spoke, Sienna's phone lay beside her plate. It lit up with a new message. I did not touch it, but I could see the preview. Dane's name at the top, and below it the words, "Still my girl, no matter what he says." Sienna flipped the phone over in one smooth motion and went on talking about how I made her feel small. The sentence stayed in my mind, pinned there like one more note in an invisible file. At one point, I excused myself to the hallway under the pretense of checking on Leah, who had finished eating and moved to the living room with a coloring book. As I walked past the kitchen, I heard Irma's voice in a lower tone. She told Sienna that if I started legal trouble, they would tell everyone I had stalked her and refused to leave, that they would frame it as her needing protection. Sienna did not protest. She just hummed in agreement. I stood there for a moment, unseen, letting the words sink in. They were not planning to tell the truth if this went to any kind of formal place. They were planning a story. Later that night, after we had dropped Leah at my parents' place for an hour so they could see her, we sat in Marta and Jens's living room. It always smelled faintly of tea and old books. I told them what had happened at dinner, from the my girl moment at the festival to Irma's whispered plan in the hallway. Marta listened without interrupting, then asked one question: whether Sienna had ever truly said clearly that our marriage was finished, or whether she only said it in public spaces where people could clap for her. I admitted that our private conversations were always slippery, that she spoke about working on things when she wanted rent paid and about being done when she wanted sympathy online. Jens sat in his usual chair, hands folded, eyes on the carpet. When I finished, he said that performance and truth could live side by side for a while, but not forever. He said that if Sienna and her mother were already planning what to call me if I used my rights, then they had no intention of playing fair. He did not tell me to act in anger. He said if I chose to respond, I should do it through systems that did not care who had the louder story, only who had records. Marta added that Leah would grow up reading whatever stayed online and whatever stayed on paper, and that only one of those could be changed with a caption later. When we finally went home, the apartment felt smaller than usual. I carried my pillow down the hall to the guest bedroom, the one I had been using more often in recent weeks. The bed was made with clean sheets, a lamp on the nightstand, my phone charging there instead of beside Sienna. As I stepped into the room, Leah appeared in the doorway holding her stuffed rabbit. She asked if I was sleeping in there again, and if that meant I would soon be just a visitor like Dane used to be, someone who came over and then left while she stayed behind. Her voice was cautious, like she was afraid of the answer. Before I could speak, my phone on the nightstand lit up silently with a call. The screen showed the word private, the label I had given the number of the person I had spoken to before about patterns and public lies. The vibration was soft but clear in the quiet room. I let it buzz without moving toward it and knelt down in front of Leah instead. I told her that whatever changed between her mother and me, I was not going to be a visitor in her life, that I was her father, and that did not expire because someone changed their mind on a stage. The call went to voicemail, the light on the screen going dark. I heard Sienna moving in the hallway, her steps pausing outside the guest room for a second before continuing. I tucked Leah into the guest bed for a moment, just to calm her, and realized as I sat on the edge that I was done waiting for someone else to write the story of what I was. The next days did not explode the way you might expect after a dinner like that. They simply stretched, long and thin, with more small cuts than big fights. In the mornings, Sienna and I moved around the kitchen like people sharing a hallway in an office building. We spoke about schedules, lunchboxes, and bus times, but not about the stage, not about my girl, not about Irma's plan to call me a stalker if I ever used my rights. Leah watched us with the quiet attention of a child who understands more than anyone admits. One Saturday, I took her to the park while Sienna went to shoot content at the gym. The sky was clear and the air smelled of damp grass. Leah climbed the small hill and rolled down, laughing, then lay on her back looking at the clouds. She asked if her mother and Dane were going to get married now that he called her his girl. I felt something twist inside me, but kept my voice level. I said that adults sometimes say big words before they are finished with the promises they already made. She asked if that meant I would have to leave. I told her I did not plan to disappear, whatever stories other people told. Later, while she ran toward the swings, I sat on the bench and opened my small notebook, the one I had started filling with dates and words instead of feelings. I wrote the day, the park name, and a simple line. Leah asks if they will get married now that he calls her his girl. I added it under notes about the festival and the Holt dinner. Around us, other parents checked their phones or called to their kids. I noticed a bulletin board near the path with a fading flyer for the River Festival stapled to it. I walked over, pretending to look for new community events, and took a photo of the board, making sure the festival name and date were visible. It felt like collecting puzzle pieces without yet knowing the entire picture, only that I would need them. On Monday, at the office, I stopped pretending I could treat all this as separate from my job. During lunch, instead of joining anyone at the far tables, I stayed at my desk with my own food hardly touched. I opened the email account I used for personal matters and pulled a thin stack of documents from my bag. A copy of our lease, a recent electricity bill, and Leah's school registration showing both our names. I used the office scanner and sent the files to myself. Back at my desk, I created 2 folders in my cloud storage, naming them simply Archive A and Archive B. Nothing dramatic, just letters. I moved the scanned files into one folder and double-checked that they appeared on my home laptop as well. As I watched, a small message popped up in the corner of the screen, telling me, "File uploaded successfully." The words were plain, but they felt like a quiet answer to the noise of Kara's captions and Irma's threats. During the same break, I opened a new document and pasted in the link to the My Girl video Kara had posted, along with the time and location. I saved screenshots of the comments calling me controlling, jealous, dangerous, all from people who had never sat at our table. When I heard footsteps behind me, I minimized everything and opened a simple route chart, pretending to adjust numbers. My heart beat fast until the footsteps passed. I reminded myself I was not doing anything wrong. I was keeping a record of things other people had chosen to say. Still, I moved slowly, like someone walking across a floor he knew had weak planks. After work, instead of going straight home, I sat in my car in the parking garage. The concrete walls made every sound echo. I put on my headphones and opened my contacts. My thumb hovered for a moment over the entry I had labeled with a single emoji instead of a name. Then I pressed it. When the call connected, I spoke in a low, steady voice. I described the pattern, the posts, the stage moment, the captions calling me controlling, the way Leah was starting to repeat phrases from other people's mouths. I did not cry or shout. I listed dates, places, and the existence of screenshots. On the other end, the person listened and asked calm questions. They talked about structured ways to respond when someone repeatedly made public statements that could harm your reputation and your child's understanding of you. They used words like formal steps, temporary arrangements, and documents you would need if you choose to move forward. I wrote down key phrases in my notebook without using any of the names they mentioned out loud. When the call ended, I did not feel triumphant, only more aware that there was a path I could take that did not involve shouting in dining rooms. That evening at my parents' place, I told Marta and Jens that I had spoken again to someone who understood how the system worked. I did not give details, only said that I was learning what my options were. Marta nodded and said that knowledge was not the same as action, but that one usually had to come before the other. Jens asked if I had started to gather everything I would need if it came to official papers. I answered that I had begun, that I was making sure nothing depended only on my memory. He said that was good, because memories could be argued with, but dates on files could not. Leah played on the rug with a puzzle, listening without looking up. When she finished, she brought me a piece I had missed and said I had to put all the corners in place before it stayed together. Back at the apartment, after Leah had gone to bed, I sat at the small desk in the corner of the living room. The thin binder labeled Household lay there, thicker now than when we bought it. On the surface, it still looked like a collection of bills, but as I opened it, I saw the pages I had added. Printed copies of Sienna's public posts where I was called controlling, pages showing the festival clip with the caption about finally saying things out loud. I slid a new page inside, a simple index I had typed with dates and short descriptions like gym launch photo, post with company tag, river stage my girl. In the desk drawer below, I taped a small USB stick labeled only with the date under a larger folder marked taxes, then closed the drawer until I heard the soft click of the lock. When Sienna came home from the gym that night, she dropped her bag in the hallway and walked straight to the kitchen. She poured herself a drink and leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. She told me that the festival clip had done well and that some followers had written to say they were proud of her for getting away from a controlling man. She looked at me while she said it, as if waiting for me to explode. I did not. I filled the kettle, set it on the stove, and asked if she understood that the words she used out there did not disappear when she came home. She rolled her eyes and answered that if I had nothing to be ashamed of, I would not care what she posted. She said I was the one making it ugly by collecting evidence instead of owning my mistakes. Later, in the guest bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed with my laptop. I checked that the files in Archive A and Archive B were synced, watching the small icons turn from gray to clear. I set a new reminder in my calendar for later in the week. Q, Old Station Notary 10 a.m., marked as Meeting Personal. I did not tell Sienna about it. I closed the laptop and sat for a moment in the quiet, feeling less like a man being dragged by someone else's story and more like someone quietly writing his own list of facts. The moment everything shifted between us did not come with a scream. It came in the kitchen the next night, with the television off and the apartment nearly silent. Sienna stood at one counter, phone in hand, laughing at a meme someone had sent her about a jealous ex. I stood at the opposite counter, my own phone beside the kettle. She said that if I kept sulking, I would give her even more material. I looked at her and told her, in an even voice, that I was done arguing in comments and dining rooms. I said I was going to handle this properly now, in ways that did not depend on who shouted louder. She laughed and asked what that was supposed to mean, saying no one would believe me over her. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a small alarm. The screen lit up with the words paper drop in neat letters, the reminder I had set. At the same moment, the old printer in the corner, which I thought was off, whirred awake and fed a single blank page through its rollers, dropping it onto the tray with a soft slap. The sound made us both look over. Sienna frowned at the empty sheet and then at my glowing screen. I reached over, silenced the alarm, and met her eyes. I repeated that I was done fighting in rooms like this. However things were handled from now on, it would not be through jokes, and it would not be on her stage. Sienna thought we were meeting at the bus terminal just so I could finally let her go with grace. She said it in the car like she had already won, dressed in travel clothes that matched her new life, suitcase ready by the door. Leah was at my parents' apartment with a puzzle and a movie. Marta had kissed my cheek and told me to remember why I was doing this. I drove to the terminal alone, clipboard on the passenger seat, my hands steady on the wheel. Inside, the waiting area smelled like coffee and exhaust. People sat on plastic chairs with bags at their feet, glancing up at the screens showing departure times. I stood by a pillar close to Bay 6, where the bus for the retreat town would arrive. My clipboard held a single visible page with the word statement at the top. The thicker envelope I had signed for was already in someone else's hands, ready. Sienna arrived with Dane, both in matching gym jackets, dragging bright suitcases behind them. She looked around, spotting me by the pillar, and lifted her chin like she was walking onto a stage. Dane stayed at her shoulder, hand on the handle of her bag as if it were a leash. She walked toward me with a small smile, saying she hoped I was ready to act like an adult. Before I could answer, a man with a folder stepped between us. He checked a paper, said her full name, and held out an envelope. At first, she did not take it. Then, with people watching from plastic chairs, she grabbed it and tore it open. Her eyes moved over the first page, taking in the words divorce petition, temporary financial and possession orders, and a clause about not calling each other controlling or abusive in front of our child or online. Color drained from her face. Dane stepped closer, asking what this was. I told them, in a low voice, that I was done being their villain in public stories while still paying for the life behind them. I said this was not revenge, it was structure, and it was for Leah as much as for me. A loudspeaker announced final boarding for their bus, the voice echoing over the tiled floor. Doors at Bay 6 slid open with a soft hiss as passengers started to line up. Sienna stood there clutching the papers, eyes moving between the bus and the clauses, while Dane hovered uncertainly beside her. I gave a small nod to the man who had served her, turned away from their voices, and walked toward the exit as the final boarding call repeated behind me and the automatic doors parted, letting me step back into the cold air without looking back.